Well, Sagan, thank you so much for being on the Entrepreneurial Success Podcast. I'm really glad that you're here. We've already had some great chats between you and me, but I'm so excited for you to share everything with my audience today. Before we get started, why don't you just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do exactly?
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me here. I am a productivity strategist for multi-passionate creatives. So I help people manage their time and energy effectively through customized, actionable strategies that really work well for your unique life and business, because every life and every business is different. So I'm really keen on making sure that these strategies that I share are very effective for being applied to multiple different sort of situations. And I have, over 10 years of experience as a freelance writer and editor, having my own business. And then I started teaching about productivity and time and energy management several years ago. I was receiving so many questions about it, and I really have worked very, very hard over the years to experiment with a lot of different things to really work from home productively in the best way possible. And I also, when I'm not, teaching about productivity and time and energy management, when I'm not doing freelance work for my own clients, I write novels and I host the Indie Author Weekly podcast. So I have my fingers in a lot of pies.
That's fantastic. And thank you so much for sharing that. And that kind of helps us with what we're going to talk about today, because you've got some great tips that you're going to share with us today, all about time management. Before we dive into that, and I'm sure the audience is very eager to hear that because everybody would like to know how to manage their time better. I'm always very intrigued when I meet other female entrepreneurs and them telling how they started their business and, kind of like the journey that they've already been on. But what was the pushing point or the passion behind what made you decide to start your business?
Well, when I first started, over 10 years ago, I've always loved to write. And so at the time, I thought that I wanted to be a health writer. I was really into healthy living and healthy lifestyles and all of that. And so I started a blog because I wanted to sort of use that as kind of a platform for building up a portfolio. And from there, it was really interesting to see how organically other things kind of came out of that. And I started writing a weekly health column for the local university paper. And then right out of university, I ended up getting a job in public relations because they had just contracted this very large client project in the health sector. So it was really interesting to see how my health blog led to these different freelance projects when I was initially thinking that it would just be a portfolio. So it was kind of neat how that sort of unfolded. And then as I was working with this PR company, I was a contract worker, which was great. So I was working from home, but I didn't really know what I was doing at the time. I had this one contract and it was great and I loved it. And then of course that contract ended. It had an end date. And I realized that I didn't know what I was doing and I didn't know how to find clients and I didn't know how to manage my time well or anything like that. So I had a few smaller freelance projects that I was still doing. And so I kept those. I had that little bit of a side hustle, but I started working at a nonprofit at a 9-to-5 job because I wanted that kind of steady income. And I needed something to feel more secure.
Yeah.
But it was really interesting because while working at a nonprofit, if you're working at a nonprofit, you have to juggle a lot of things. You have to wear many hats. You have to learn a lot about self-discipline and managing others. And, you have interns coming in on a rotating basis, especially in a very small nonprofit. So I was learning how to really manage myself much better while I was still doing my side hustle. And I realized over the course of working there that while I enjoyed the work, it wasn't really calling to me. I was dragging my feet and I would, on the weekends I'd be like, oh, I have to go to work on Monday, right? And I really much more enjoyed being able to be my own boss and being able to work with clients directly and have a bit more of a relationship with my freelance writing clients. And so I decided at that point that it was really time for me to make that leap to be my own boss once again. And have that freedom and flexibility of my schedule, especially because working at a 9-to-5 job, I found it so frustrating knowing that my personal best times of day for working were they're not 9 to 5 hours. And I felt like it was such a waste of time and money for any kind of business to be forced to work to this particular schedule when I wasn't doing my best work. And I could have done so much better work if I was working on my own hours. So it was really interesting how that then kind of led to this jumping off point of working from home full time. And I planned everything out because I knew that, previously I had struggled with it. So I spent 5 months before, my contract was up for renewal at this nonprofit. I spent those 5 months like really preparing well, getting clients, building up my plan for how I was going to work from home successfully. And that was 6 years ago. And I've never looked back since. I've been now working from home full time for 6 years, and it's worked out really well having that sort of plan in place for how to do it. And then my business has just unfolded very organically from there with, the freelance work and then starting to teach others about how I do it. It's just been really lovely. Yeah.
I love how you're telling your story as a journey and how it evolved as well, because I think that is one of the main things that I also want to tell the audience is when you start a business, that business that you're starting is not the be all and end all business. It is definitely a journey and it's evolving. And with whatever you start with, it might not be the business you're going to have forever, but it is that journey that you're going on, that self-development and that growth, and kind of figuring out as well where your strengths are and where it's taking you. And I'm sure you can say exactly that you've kind of discovered so much more about yourself on this journey from when you started up to where you are now, and you're still learning and still discovering, and heavens know this journey might just open up some other opportunities, and you might just head in a different direction in the future. You never know where it's going to take you. So I love the fact that you're telling that whole story.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wake up every morning. I now am at the point in my life where it's, especially over the past, I guess since I started working from home full time, I wake up every morning and I check in with myself and I ask, am I happy with the direction that things are taking? And, if I am not happy for more than, so many days in a row, because we all have our bad days, right? Like that just happens. But if it continues to be an ongoing type of thing, then that's a sign that it's time to pivot. And I think it's really cool when you have your own business because there's so much opportunity to make those pivots and to really make those changes. And it didn't occur to me until, I spent that entire last year really at that nonprofit job, not being very happy with it, and after that, when I realized I have not been happy at this job for more days than I am happy with it, that's a big problem. And I think so many people go through their lives not being happy in their work, in their personal lives, whatever it might happen to be. And so really checking in every single day and just being like, is this what feels good for me now? Because yes, it felt great for me 3 years ago, but is this still where I want to be? And if it isn't, what would bring me much more fulfillment? So yeah, I love all of that kind of thing, and to really open yourself up to changing directions and just seeing where things take us.
Yes. And I think also from another sense, when you're saying changing direction, some people always find that if they're starting something and they feel this is not really it and they change the direction, it's almost seen as though they have failed. And I think it's got that negative connotation almost, where people need to change their mindset and realize that if you're making a pivot, if you're changing direction, it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing, because it meant that you came to a point where you realized, I want to do something else now. And I love how you kind of using that in your own journey, in your own story. So thank you so much for sharing that. Like I said, I'm always so fascinated by sharing everybody else's success stories from where they've started to where they are now. And heavens know, maybe 2-3 years from now, you and I are going to chat again and something else would have happened. But that is the whole journey of life and being in business, and especially working for yourself. When you work for yourself, you have the absolute, how can I say, you've got the absolute control to make those decisions, where if you work full-time, you've got to go with the normal flow of, you know, the business that you're in, or the employment structure that you're in. And there's nothing wrong with being employed, don't get me wrong. It is just the kind of fulfillment as a female entrepreneur, working from home, having that kind of benefit and the control, you know, it far outweighs so many other things than I've experienced personally as well while working full-time.
It's very freeing to work for yourself, to have your own business. Even if you are working long hours, it's very freeing and liberating, I find.
It's fun. It's fun. I work so many hours. I work more hours in a day than I used to work when I was fully employed. But you know what? I love every single minute of it. Sometimes I have to physically stop myself and go, okay, it's 7 o'clock, it's 8 o'clock, it's 9 o'clock. I have to stop myself and switch my computer off so I can just take that break. But it's because you're enjoying it so much. And I think also you can't really explain that to somebody unless they've experienced it themselves.
Yes, absolutely, 100%.
Now, let's move over and talk about the 7 tips that you want to share with us, all about the time management, really, and productivity. How to become more productive, but also manage your time better. So I know you've got some great tips that you want to share with us. So I'm going to hand over to you. Why don't you just walk it through? And and let's talk about it, because I'm really excited to see what you're going to share with us.
Sure. Okay, so tip number 1 is to use your business plan as a tool. And one of the big problems that a lot of people have with their businesses is that they create a business plan and then they set it aside, and it just sits in the drawer gathering dust. And that is not the purpose of a business plan. And I think, you know, I always hear from people that they're like, oh, I have to create a business plan. Like, it's so boring. Business planning is sexy, right? Like, there's actually, like, it can be a really fun thing. It doesn't need to be boring. It doesn't need to be full of jargon. And really, if you are approaching it from that angle, if that to you is fun, like if you know, putting tons of jargon in there, if that is fun and enjoyable for you, then by all means do it. But it doesn't need to be like that. And so you can really adapt and create a business plan that fits your particular type of business. You can do it with, you know, through mind mapping and that kind of thing, right? Like, you can create a visual version of a business plan if that speaks to you. You can use color coding if you want. Like, you can use all kinds of things. So the really important thing is crafting a business plan that you are then going to use as a tool for your business. It should really direct everything in your business. You should be able to refer to it on an ongoing basis. And it should also be something that grows organically as you and your business grow. So as you are moving along with your business, you have your business plan in place. And again, like, it comes back to that whole pivoting piece, right? So if you find that you did have a plan to move forward in one direction, and then as you're going through it, you realize, oh, actually, I want to just like make this little adjustment over here. Well, then you tweak your business plan and you move it forward. So I look at my business plan, you know, depending on the season of my business. Sometimes it's on a like weekly basis, pretty much. I'll glance through it and make little tweaks. And other times it'll be every few months. But I really don't like going any longer than a few months without looking at my business plan and really seeing, okay, what was my plan initially and where do I want to move forward with it?
Yeah, so I absolutely love that you're putting that down there, because actually I just had a conversation last week with one of my students, and she's now starting her own business. She's really excited, and she said to me, how do I create a business plan? You know, I can download things from Google and see how to lay out a business plan. And I actually just realized, like, oh my gosh, it is one of those things that everybody thinks is the most boring part. Before you have to start a business, you have to have a business plan. But I love the fact that you're mentioning, you know, you can do a mind mapping and be very creative with it, because that kind of creativity that you're putting into a business plan and just playing with it and, you know, enjoying that creative stage, really, that's what's really going to ignite you. And also it's going to open up a floodgate of more ideas that you can put together in order to have a great business plan. So I'm really excited that you mentioned that. And I hope, I'm not going to say names, but I hope that student is listening to this podcast and seeing this video, because it is not just me who's saying that. I'm so glad you mentioned that as well. But I definitely agree with you. It is all about having fun and just let the creativity juices flow and just enjoy the process. And it doesn't have to be a black and white paragraph, word for word document. It can be something that you can visually see on a daily basis, or like you said, on a monthly basis even, and just to work on it on constantly and building on it.
Yeah. Yeah. It can be a lot of fun. Basically anything in our business, if we change our approach to it, we can have fun with it. Yeah. It's all about how we approach it. It's all about the angle we take. It's all about reframing how we are going about it. Sometimes it takes some thinking outside the box. Sometimes it takes a little bit of creativity, but anything in our businesses can be fun if we're driven enough to find a fun way to do it, you know.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but from a time management perspective as well, it gives you an outside perspective or a bigger overview as to what your business is going to look like, what you're planning really. So bringing that back then to time management. Mm-hmm. Is it then a source where you can kind of break it into stages and kind of manage your time better in order to see, or even just to find out, listen, this is where I'm heading. What kind of things do I need to break it down into in order to make sure that I take the right actionable steps to get there?
Exactly, which actually brings us to tip number 2.
Oh, perfect.
Which is really having a balance between planning and taking action. So you're absolutely right. With our business plan, as a tool, it is going to save us so much time because we know what direction we're going to take. And by using it as that tool and referring to it on an ongoing basis, we're able to catch things when something's slightly off and maybe going in a direction that we don't want to quite take. We can stop ourselves from continuing down that direction, and we can make sure that we are pivoting as needed and making little tweaks, smaller changes, and going in the correct direction, rather than going way down this path and then realizing, oh, this actually isn't where I want to be. Now I have to backtrack, or now I have to go way over here to this other side. So that's really where having that business plan as a tool and referring to it regularly saves so much time, especially in the long term. And so moving towards that tip number 2 with having that balance between planning and taking action, it's always really interesting to me when I'm talking to my clients in my own courses, how, some of them are really big planners. A lot of them are big planners, and other people are really into taking action without planning. But either end of the spectrum is a problem. If we plan too much and never take action, then our businesses never make progress. And if we just jump right into taking action and we don't plan strategically, then we're going to make a ton of mistakes, and mistakes are really good learning opportunities, absolutely, but those are really preventable mistakes. We don't actually need to make those mistakes. We can prevent them from happening. So having a balance and being very mindful and intentional and strategic with our planning, and then implementing it by taking action and then going back to planning, and sort of making sure that these two things are working in conjunction and that we are moving forward sort of at the same time with planning and taking action, that makes such a huge difference to, again, saving time by not making mistakes and really being much more productive and efficient with how we are using that time in our business.
Yes. I couldn't have put it better myself, and particularly because you're saying, a little saying that I have is there's no such thing as mistakes, only lessons. But at the same time, if you're just constantly taking action and you don't go and look at your plan or what strategies you're using, you can have quite a few hard lessons. And some of those lessons, because we're all human beings, some of those lessons can knock you down. And that's where a lot of people give up, really, and they don't continue on their journey to become an entrepreneur or to build their business because they feel it's too hard. They fail too many times, and the actual thing that they really failed was not to have a strategy or a business plan to follow. So my goodness, like I said, I couldn't have put it better myself. It's just, that balance between taking action and having a strategy or a business plan in place. And talk to us, what is tip number 3 then, once you've got that in place?
Okay, so tip number 3 is to work backwards with your strategic plan. So if you have a particular goal that you've set for yourself, then you can work backwards to figure out what small tasks along the way are going to lead up to that bigger goal. And how can I break down that bigger goal into something that's much more manageable, tangible, realistic for where I am right now. And it's very valuable if we look at all of these small pieces in our business and see, how is every single component here leading me towards my bigger goal? Oftentimes when I talk to my clients about this, they take a look and they realize that they have been working on all kinds of tasks that do nothing for them, that are just busy work and really wasting a lot of time and energy and not making any progress because they're not all connected together. So working backwards is going to help you with your timeline and all of that for figuring out what's a realistic timeline for your big goal. And it's just going to make everything easier to manage when you're looking at what really matters in my business and what tasks are going to move that needle forward, are really going to take me in the direction that I want. And what tasks can I maybe set aside completely or delegate or outsource or change in some way so that the all of the different pieces and the threads are connected much more meaningfully and strategically.
Yes. So working backwards. So and I think that's one of the things, sorry, I'm going over my words here, but what I want to say is the whole idea about goal planning is obviously once you have that goal set up there, just kind of figuring out what the main things are that you need to do to reach that goal and not really faff around with so many other things. I've had this in my business. When I started my business, oh my gosh, I did everything and anything just to feel busy instead of being productive. And that is a big lesson that I learned fairly quickly on, but it's also because I didn't know how to set my goals up for myself, where I wanted to go in the next 90 days, in the next 6 months, 12 months. I had no planning whatsoever. And that kind of works with your business plan as well, because your business plan would entail or would at least have those goals in place. So you at least know where you're heading. And I didn't know from your experience when you started your business, was it something that you had as well? Or was it just me going crazy, feeling very busy, but not productive at all?
Well, that is definitely one of my big issues that I had. Yeah, like that first time that I started with my business, I had no end goal. I had no plan or direction in place. I didn't really, you're just working on all the things. You're constantly putting out fires, right? Yeah. And you feel like you can't step away from your business for a single day because it can't run without you. And I mean, if that is the case, if you I feel like as entrepreneurs, we tend to work on our business every day, like we were saying before, because we love it so much, right? But if something happens and you are forced to take a few days off of your business should still be able to run, right? Yes. It should still be able to maintain itself. And if it doesn't, then that is definitely a sign that, you're probably spending a lot of time on like little busy tasks that aren't really contributing to that business progress and that foundational piece.
Okay, so let's move on to the fourth tip.
Yes. Okay. So tip number 4 is to arrange your schedule and your work plan and your tasks around your energy levels. Managing your energy is super, super important because we all have different times of day when we are more creative than others, when we are more able to work on some tasks rather than other types of projects. So really figuring out, even if you have a 9-to-5 job, how can all of these pieces fit together and how can I arrange my tasks so that the energy levels are really reflected well. For my own business, I always find it really interesting because I find that if I'm working on a really creative project, like if I'm working on one of my novels, I need to set aside an entire day where the only task on that day is to write, a chapter of my novel. And that's really helpful for me because I know that it's such a high energy requirement. Whereas there's other tasks in my business, social media scheduling, bookkeeping, administrative tasks, those types of things, they're very low energy. So you can really do them at any time of day. They don't really require that sort of same piece, at least for me. So looking at when do I have higher amounts of energy, and also looking ahead to see what other things are going on in my life. And if there's something in my personal life or, another, 9 to 5 job or my volunteer work, if I know that a big event is coming up that's going to be draining or it's going to be using up a lot of my energy stores, how can I make sure that I plan ahead for that so that the tasks that I'm working on are not going to be high energy tasks during that particular time period. And that's going to save so much time, because when we really capitalize and maximize our energy levels, we get work done so much faster. We get high quality work done so much faster and so much more efficiently. Whereas if we try to work on these projects that really require a high energy level, if we try to work on those during low energy times, it will take us easily 5 times as long to do, and it probably won't be as good of work. So looking at your schedule, looking at your work plan, really figuring out, how can I arrange this? How can I fit in my tasks so that they suit my particular energy levels? That can make a huge difference.
It is so interesting that you're saying that. I'm sitting here nodding my head going, oh my goodness. And it is something that I've actually never tapped into. I always talk about protecting your own energy while you're working and when you're communicating with other people. But yes, I mean, when I schedule my calendar, I know for a fact, first thing in the morning, I'm at the top of my range. I know exactly that I've got a lot of energy. I'm excited, and I really use that energy well. That's normally the time when I do a lot of planning, or I do my blog post writing, or all those kind of things, content planning, all those kind of things. So that's when I'm really at the peak with my energy. And then the rest of the day, as the day goes on, I know my energy gets depleted. So I tend to do the less, the things that take less of my energy during the end of the day. But I never thought about it. It's just now that you mentioned that, it kind of made sense to myself. But at the same time, on the other spectrum, when I started my business, and I'm so sorry I'm using myself as an example again, but it's just because I can completely, relate to that. When I started my business, obviously I was working full-time and started running my business part-time. And I was doing that in the evenings. So after a full day, 9 to 5, coming back home, being completely drained, negative energy from the office, and now you go and try and sit and work on your business that you are kind of cultivating for yourself. That was so hard, not because of the task, but because of my energy levels. It wasn't quite there where I wanted it to be in order to be productive and getting my own business off the ground. And it just all makes sense now that you're saying it.
It makes a really big difference. And it's also, that is fascinating. And I think it's also really interesting to look at the seasons of the year, and also seasons of, life and business, but like literally the seasons of the year, as they change, our energy levels usually change. So we're probably going to have to adapt things according to that, right? So for me, very weirdly, the springtime is a low energy time for me. I just don't have a lot of energy during that time. So I kind of know not to plan any big launches or really big projects during that time. Springtime is much more of like maintenance mode for my business. And then also looking at, like, if, in the middle of winter, maybe you have lower energy levels, or maybe you find that the hours of the day, when you're normally more creative or energized in the morning, maybe you end up being that way more in the evening. And you can kind of adapt, right? So I always find it really interesting to check in with ourselves and pay attention to how our energy levels change depending on the seasons, the actual seasons of the year, but also the seasons of our life and our business and what else is going on.
No, I love that you said that. Thank you so much for pointing that out. I just had a little light bulb moment.
That's wonderful.
Okay, talk to us about the 5th tip.
Okay. So tip number 5 is to choose the systems and strategies that work well for you. Just because something works really great for someone else does not mean that it's going to be right for you. I have tried Asana and Trello and those types of platforms. They just aren't a good fit for me, for my sort of style, or at least at this stage of my business. Who knows? Things might change down the line. But I really find that what works well for me, sirens go by, is to really focus on using paper sort of tools and that kind of thing, and spreadsheets and all of that. And So looking at what systems and strategies are the right fit for your particular business and for your particular style, and also at this point, again, of your business and your life. Sometimes we try a task management system and it works really great for us. And then a year later, we find that it's just not quite the right fit, especially if our business changes. So then you want to adapt. So I think that there's a lot of benefit from seeing what other people are doing to manage their time, manage their tasks, but then also to use that as a starting off point, right? To use that as an inspiration and to get ideas, and then experiment to see what tools feel good for you. And if a particular tool or software or system just doesn't quite fit right, then stop trying to force it.
Yeah.
Figure out a different thing that works for you.
Yes. And I'm going to use a stupid example, but it is something that is so common. In the beginning, when I started my podcast, obviously I did a lot of the podcast episodes myself. So I didn't have to schedule anything. You know, I had my calendar and I knew when I was doing my recordings. But then I started interviewing other female entrepreneurs, and I was always communicating via email going, oh, what date and time suits you to do the recording? And we used to go backwards and forwards on email. And then I had to remember, oh gosh, there's a time difference, you know, between me and the US, or me and India, or wherever I was, you know, holding these recordings with the female entrepreneurs. And then all of a sudden somebody said to me, you know, you should possibly look into Calendly online where people can go and schedule. And I was like, oh, I'd never thought about that. But it was so obvious, but it is something that I just didn't think of using at that moment in time. And I started using it. Oh my gosh, the scheduling has become so much easier. And now I use it for so many other things in my business as well. But yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying, because at that moment in time when I was doing my own podcast, I didn't need kind of a strategy or a platform to help me. And then when it got to that stage where I realized, gosh, this is not kind of working well, going backwards and forwards on email, trying to schedule things, use technology, use a program or a platform like Calendly, like you saying Trello, or any of those other kind of platforms that are available that makes life so much easier for all of us, but then also trying to find what works for you.
Yes. And I love that example, especially because sometimes it's the things that, you know, you're looking back at it now and you're like, oh, that is so obvious. Like, how did I not think about that? Sometimes it's those small things that we are so into our business that we can't even see it, right? Yeah. So it's incredible. It's fascinating how just little changes like that, really a fairly straightforward, easy change to implement, made such a huge difference for you.
Yes.
And, you know, like I have found, like I've used things like Trello over the years when I was working in a team setting, right? In like a business partnership, and, you know, working at my 9-to-5 job as a group, when there's like a lot of people collaborating on the exact same project, then it's very useful for those types of things, right? So yeah, absolutely. When our business changes or when we're working on different types of projects, then different tools will just feel better and they'll work better. And also, you know, the more that we use software or tools or whatever it happens to be, systems, the more that we use the ones that we really like, the more that we're going to be excited to continue using them. And if we don't like them, if they don't feel good, then we're not going to use them effectively or properly. And then we're not going to be referring to them regularly. And then we're going to forget about the tasks on our list. And then things are going to slip through the cracks. And, you know, it becomes this sort of snowball effect of a lot of different problems. So It's really interesting when we find the right ones that work for us, how that can just dramatically change things.
Yes. Oh no, gosh, that I think that was a big wake-up call for me as well, but also a lesson well learned, because now when I'm struggling with something, I'm going and figuring out or asking around, is there a kind of tool that does this? You know, does somebody know of anything? Because you have to make your life easier at the end of the day, especially if you're running a business. There's got to be some ways for you to have a better strategy in place in order to work on things or manage your time better as well.
Yes, absolutely. And that brings us into tip number 6. Very, very beautifully, actually.
Good. So please tell us about tip number 6. I'm ready with my pen.
So tip number 6 is to document your processes. So make your life easier by not reinventing the wheel within your own business. So this is a really great thing where you can have a processes and procedures manual where you can have everything outlined in your business for how to do specific things. Everything from, blog posts. So what goes into writing a blog post? What are the different pieces? Like, I need to create an image for it. I need to create a click to tweet button. I need to make sure that it has, an optimized headline, all of these different pieces. And then once that blog post is published, what are all the things I need to do to market it, right? Mm-hmm. Where do I want to put it into my social media scheduler, all of that. So having that laid out in an actual manual that you can then refer to and see exactly step by step, this is how I do it. Then you don't have to keep it all in your brain. You don't have to try to keep all of these different systems inside your head. And I've found that really useful as well when it comes to my own podcast for editing the podcast. What is the tech involved? What are the steps to, take out a little piece or whatever it happens to be. So having that in virtually every single part of your business saves so much time and really prevents things from slipping through the cracks. And the fun thing about this manual as well is that similar to your business plan, it's an organic tool that you can keep using on an ongoing basis, but you can also keep adding to. So you don't need to create this manual all in one sitting. Instead, as you are doing any particular task in your business, you just write down the steps that you're doing and it's into your manual. And now for next time. And then when you're doing another task, you just add that in. And then you can have like a solid table of contents at the beginning that outlines, what exactly is in your manual so that you can easily jump from one page to the next. But having this is such a game changer really for streamlining tasks. I also find it's very important from a standpoint of if something happens to you in your business or in your personal life and something needs to be set aside for a while or you need to outsource or delegate it, you can then pass off your manual to someone else and you can say, here's the steps, right? So you're really ensuring that there is that sort of contingency piece that someone else can take over. And if people don't do this at a 9-to-5 job, that is a huge problem because again, if something happens to you, other people should be able to pick things up. So, in any kind of business, everyone should have a processes and procedures manual.
I love that you're saying that because I actually had a conversation a couple of weeks ago with another female entrepreneur and we were talking about processes and she just started herself putting a mini manual together about what it is that she's doing in a business. And then she realized that as she went through these things, she kind of like figured out, but these things are nitty-gritty things that I don't really need to do. I can outsource that. So she took that whole mini manual and she gave it to a VA and said, here are the process of what I do. Can you just follow these processes and help me out? And it was such a big eye-opener for her, number one, because she put this mini manual together without even realizing the benefit it would have for her when she started using a VA. But then also she started implementing and putting other processes in place. And now she's thinking of employing people. So she can hand those processes over to them and say, here's basically the job description of what you need to do step for step. And this is what you need. And this is what I expect of you. And it is just so amazing that you're saying this now as well, of just documenting your processes. Maybe it's not something that you need yourself right now because you know the processes, but what happens if you can't do the work next week? And you need a VA and you need to employ somebody to help you. You've got everything documented and you don't have to start from scratch.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. I love that so much that she went through that without even realizing. And then all of these other pieces came out of it. That's wonderful.
Yes. And I think that the reason why she started, she told me, was just more to kind of make sense of what she was doing and where she was spending so much of her time, apart from just having her calendar. But looking at the processes, as an example, you said editing your podcast. I'm editing my podcast and I know that there are certain steps that I'm taking, but there are actual easier ways of doing that. And I wouldn't have figured that out if I didn't document the process and realize, I'm having 20 steps here where actually I could have just had 5 steps if I did it this way. And that's basically how she started, and just realized she was creating a brilliant process for herself, a brilliant manual of how her business operates.
That's wonderful. And I think too, if we have a lot of different moving pieces in our business, and if we say, oh, I'm going to take a break from doing this particular component of my business just for like a couple months, when you come back to it, you might not remember all of the little steps along the way, right? So when you have it all just documented, it's so easy to come back to it, and you don't feel like it's this huge learning curve again, right? Which makes such a difference. And I also just love freeing up that brain space.
Yeah.
You don't have to keep it all in your head. Why are you keeping things in your head that don't need to be there when you could use that space for so many other things? Because having that mental distraction is going to really hinder you when you're working on different projects, right?
Yes.
It's really difficult to get focused on a task at hand when we have all these things in our head that we're trying to hold at the same time.
Yes, very, very important. Okay, and I guess that takes us to the last tip of your 7 tips.
Yes. So tip number 7 is to check in with yourself on an ongoing basis. I like doing this with weekly audits. So one of the things that I actually have in my processes and procedures manual is my weekly audits, and my list of, I think it's about 20 questions that I kind of like to ask myself every single week. So having a weekly check-in is a wonderful opportunity to reflect on the past week and see, okay, what do I like about what happened? What worked? What didn't work? Why did something work? Why did something else not work? How do I feel about all of this? Do I feel good? Am I pleased about the direction that things are taking? So really having that reflection process and looking very tangibly at the numbers too. How many new clients did I get, right? All of these types of things. Also looking at, what did I say that I was going to do for myself? What projects did I plan to do? And maybe if I didn't do them, why didn't I do them? And then sort of taking that time to do some free writing, as well as that really solid reflection, and then planning ahead for the upcoming week. So looking at, your schedule and what do I want to work on when, but also how do I want to take what worked last week and kind of apply that moving forward? What are my goals for this week, and how am I going to achieve those goals? I really like this method, especially because if you are checking in with yourself on a weekly basis, and if you include that sort of free writing component of writing down, oh, I said I was going to do this last week, but I couldn't because this came up in my personal life, so I'll do it this coming week. If you are writing that and then you start looking back, because one of the things that I like to do every single week is kind of glance back and, what did I say over the past couple months? You might find that every single week you've had an excuse for why you didn't do something. And you will not be able to notice that you have been using that excuse, especially if it's a recurring issue. You won't notice that unless you are doing this type of practice. So it's really easy for us to go weeks, months, years, putting something off, always having excuses for why we're not doing it. But if you have it in writing, you can actually look back and see, oh, I am always having excuses. Why is that happening? What is actually going on here then? And then you can really make very big changes. So having those weekly audits is kind of a build on of what I was saying earlier about checking in with myself every day to see, how do I feel about everything? It's a much more in-depth process. It's a very strategic, detailed sort of version of that, of really intentionally figuring out, where am I? What happened? Where do I want to be? How am I going to get there?
Yes. I love what you're saying about having a weekly check-in. It's something very similar to what I do. And I, on the other spectrum as well, what I do is I call on Sundays, really, when I look back at my calendar and everything that happened, everything that I did, I also have like what I call a little celebration. So I looked at everything good that happened, and I kind of want to celebrate it almost in a little way and go, oh my gosh, yes, I achieved this and I did this and this was amazing. Because what it does, it gets me kind of like hyped up in a little way, where I get really excited and realize, so many good things have happened. And then with that kind of like hyped up, energetic feeling, that happy feeling, I go, okay, I'm really worked up now. Let's go and plan the week ahead. What is my diary looking like for the week ahead? And it kind of, it brings it back to just enjoying and having fun in business. Because once you're in that happy place, that happy mood, and you plan your week and you look at what is lying ahead for yourself, it's something to look forward to, I find, as well. And it's a nice way of reflecting back, but also getting ready for what's coming your way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you have that like little celebration aspect. That is so beautiful, and like how joyful. And there are so many things, it's really easy for us to do something amazing in our business, no matter how big or small it might be,
yes,
and then just move past it. Whereas you're absolutely right. We need to like really celebrate every step along the way. And then that gets us even more motivated and jazzed up to keep moving forward. We put so much pressure on ourselves, and we can have so much more fun with it. And we can, celebrating everything is so beautiful.
Yes, just keeping the good vibes, the energy flowing. And for me in particular, because I love waking up in the morning like you do, and I love getting behind my computer and getting ready, but also it's all about, how can I say that, enthusiasm that goes with it. And you can't just have enthusiasm out of the blue. It's something that's got to be created from within you, and that kind of helps, it spurs it on, just being in a good place, celebrating the good things that have happened, and go, right, I'm going to top that this week. And just pushing yourself in a nice way of just being in a good place and having the energy flowing constantly. Because if you don't have that energy and you're coming from a negative point of view, maybe things might not go well and you'll have more off days than up.
Yes, for sure.
Oh my goodness. So again, I really, really love this conversation. I'm just quickly going to recap a little bit about what we said. So the 7 tips are, and please jump in and correct me if I'm got any of them wrong. So what I've gathered is, obviously the first one is use your business plan, or get a business plan and use it as a tool. And I love the fact that you said have fun with it, be creative, and just use that to direct everything in your business from where you are now to where you want to go. And then at the same time, having that balance between taking action and obviously planning. And that segues into the 3rd tip, which is obviously working backwards from your goals. So thinking about your business plan, implementing your goals into that, and then with the strategic planning, taking action, but then working backwards and knowing what kind of action you need to take. And then the 4th one is to arrange your schedules around your energy, which I love, love, love. And I'm going to do that so much more now. The 5th one, what strategies work for you? So obviously, what kind of platforms, what kind of things work for you? Strategies that work for other people might not work for you because you're differently aligned within your business. You've got different energy levels. The 6th one, document your processes, which I really think is a big one. It's really important to do. And then the last one, obviously, to check in with yourself. And I love the fact that you said you do it on a weekly basis. I do it on a weekly basis. And I think it's a great thing to do because, yes, I think apart from just checking in on what you've accomplished and what you might not have accomplished, it's also a good way for you to see where you're heading. Are you still working towards those goals, that business plan that you've set up, and are you still in line with that? I guess those are the 7 tips. I thank you so much for sharing those with us. Before we obviously say goodbye, you've got an awesome free cheat sheet for everyone. So those of you listening, why don't you tell us about the free cheat sheet and what it all entails?
Sure. So it is a time-saving tips cheat sheet. So it outlines a variety of actionable and really easy to implement ideas for how to save over 45 hours every month in your business. So it is a really great cheat sheet. It has a lot of really wonderful ideas, and some of them are, again, back to those like really small, easy changes that you can make that get you huge results. So you can grab that at saganmorrow.com/savetime.
Amazing. Thank you so much for giving that to the audience. And I don't know about you, but I can do with extra 45 hours in a month. So what we'll do is the link will be below in my show notes. For those of you listening, watching this video, please, please, please go down below, grab that free cheat sheet. I'm going to have a look at it myself as well, because I want more hours in a month. But again, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for sharing all your experience and knowledge and tips and your success story. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Take care.